Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Al-hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Pull up a chair and get ready for some candid and uncompromising discussion with experts, innovators, agitators, and influential people from every corner of health and well-being. From inside the hospital to at home in the kitchen, we're leaving no stone unturned in our quest to uncover the secrets of healthier, happier, more successful, and less stressful lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and without further ado, let's meet this episode's guest. Hello Kirsten, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, very well, very well. So burnout is a big topic, and the question is, where do we start, and how did it start for you?
Well, two questions there. How did it start for me? So I was one of those typical high achievers, A's, 2 degrees from Oxford, that kind of background. And I went into the civil service on the civil service fast stream, which is like an accelerated promotion scheme. And it really became clear to me that I had a problem when I had my first panic attack, which was 3 weeks after starting work in my first kind of senior level meeting. And I didn't really kind of know what was going on, but I started to feel quite funny. And I was taking the minutes, and I looked at my notes afterwards, and they were almost kind of gobbledygook. And then the feeling passed, and I thought, well, that was strange. And then the next morning, on my way to work again, I had my second panic attack. And this was when the tube stopped in a tunnel, and I thought I was going to be late for work. And that became a pattern of panic, basically, that took me years to resolve. And alongside that, I experienced these bouts of what I used to call my illness. And about every 6 weeks or so, I'd be wiped out and have to go to bed. And about every couple of years, I'd be wiped out for about 3 months at a time. And the two things ran hand in hand or were in parallel for a long time. And they became normal to me. I never really sought help. I never told the doctor about my panic attacks. I barely told anybody about them, really. And it was something that I struggled on my own. And at the same time, I was holding down really serious high-powered jobs. I spent 2 years working in Brussels with the Foreign Office, negotiating for the UK. I worked in the Cabinet Office for the Prime Minister's European Advisor. And then I spent 5 years working in the world of law enforcement doing strategy stuff, which was a very high-pressured, stressful place to try to do strategy stuff, particularly as a much younger woman. So it was only when I was eventually diagnosed with chronic fatigue, after years. I mean, this went on since I was it was started when I was 17, and it then just got a lot worse. The panic attack started when I was at work. And eventually I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue, and I found this amazing way of changing my mindset, which really helped.
Wow.
And yeah, no, it was completely revolutionary, absolutely transformed my life. But I can see the patterns started from when I was young, the perfectionist thinking, the high achieving thinking, and it was the work became the crucible where it really became worse. But it was there all through my life. And I feel very lucky that I've come out the other side. I now I have my own business. I have a family. I know that I could still get panic attacks, but I don't get them because I know how to deal with them. And I haven't had a single episode of my illness since I learned how to deal with my mindset. So for me, it's been a very long journey. I mean, it was from the age of 17 to 31 that I struggled with this. But I feel like it's made me a better person. And it has made me more understanding of the realities of mental illness, and even on a more general level, mental frailty, fragility. We think we're invincible, and we're not. And that is something I really, really work with my clients on. And again, for me, it's been the foundation of this new career. I want to coach people to help them be successful in the kind of high pressured environments I worked in, but without suffering the negative consequences of what we do to ourselves. The context is never that helpful, but actually we make it worse for ourselves by the pressure we put on ourselves with our unsupported mindsets.
Could you tell me more about that mindset shift that you went through that changed everything for you?
Well, I was very lucky. I found a particular mind-body program called the Lightning Process, which was invented by a man called Phil Parker, who is an osteopath, who then learnt hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming. And he developed this, he calls it a training program. And it's 3 half days, one after the other. And it helps you understand how the way you think affects your biological systems, which it's evidence that it does. And if you change the way you think, you can change your physical responses. And it's one of these things that sounds almost too good to be true, but people literally come in wheelchairs and walk out 3 days later. So if anybody is suffering from any form of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anything like that, I really recommend they have a look at it. It's one of these, the world of chronic fatigue, I don't want to get involved in it because it's so controversial. It's so emotive as a subject, and it's too close to me. I don't want to go there because I was there for a long time. But if anybody, and I don't offer it, I'm not trained in it, I don't offer it. But if anybody is suffering, I really recommend they have a look and see if it could work for them, because you don't have to suffer. There is an alternative if you are willing to be open to it.
That's amazing. We do get drowned in our suffering, and sometimes we get addicted to it, because it is sometimes it's better to suffer than to actually. Some people are scared to thrive. They'd rather survive.
I completely agree, but I think it's actually almost more than that. It becomes part of people's identities. I mean, I think the bravest thing I've ever heard was there was a woman who I trained with whose husband had chronic fatigue, and he had it for 26 years. And he had been ill almost their entire marriage. He hadn't been able to hold down a job. They'd had 3 kids. She'd done all of the looking after. And he went on the Lightning Process and got better. And I feel like to be able to accept that he had a role to play in his own recovery, and to not be stuck after all those wasted, one could argue wasted years, to be able to kind of say, actually, what, the rest of my life is worth living. Because I think you can become stuck in this idea that you are an ill person, and if you don't have that, what have you got left? Especially if being an ill person has taken you out of normal life for a long time, which it did for him. To be able to say, actually, even though 26 years later, I haven't been able to live a normal life, I am now going to do that. I just think that's astonishing, really, and so brave. But you have to be willing to reconstruct a life without this thing that has become your defining feature, which not everybody, understandably, can do.
And it does take time. Some people think that this can happen instantly, or within a day or a week. Sometimes it takes years, and sometimes it doesn't happen.
Absolutely, and being brave enough to go on that journey. That is. I think for me, it was very much, I just couldn't bear being where I was any longer. Anything was better. I mean, I was willing to try anything and everything, and I did. The Lightning Process wasn't the first thing I tried by any means. I spent about 1.5 years looking at different ways to try and make things better. But if where you are is bad enough and you want it enough, then it's worth because the journey can be painful, all the setbacks and the things not working. But yeah, God, I just wanted to get better. More than anything, I wanted to get better.
And it was interesting because you came from a complex system to a simple system, and that kind of worked for you.
With the mindset ideas?
Yeah, sort of, your work was very complicated in the sense that you had 2 degrees, you're working in a very complicated system, i.e. the government, and yet you found some simple answers to your problems.
Well, I think simplicity, you should try to find that wherever you can, because that is, and if you can find that within you, it doesn't, the context that you're in is less relevant. I mean, that for me, I've just started my coaching business just over 1 year ago. It's an entirely new world. The difference between being a civil servant in a nice, safe, large organization and being a single, a solopreneur, entrepreneur it's unbelievably different. But what I try to do is, keep it simple, one thing at a time. What can I manage? How do I want it to fit around my life as it is now? So I think for me, it always comes back to your mindset. It always comes back to how you approach the context you're in, because you can choose to see what you want to see, and you can choose to respond in the way that is best for you. It's not always easy, but that is a choice that you can make, because you can influence the way that you think and the way that you see the world. And there are some enormously powerful tools to help you do that. And I think that's if you can do that, that means that whatever you do, you can thrive.
Could you give us sort of 3 top tips about these tools that you just mentioned?
So I would say the first one is to remember that you look at the world from your perspective, and your perspective is not always the same as everybody else's. So understanding that people are coming from their own, there's this phrase, the map is not the territory. Everybody has their own different map, and that comes from their own personal experiences and the way that they see the world. And assuming other people are going to behave like you or think like you is really unhelpful. So that I think is the first one, is to have that understanding of the perspectives of different people, because then you understand the limits of what you can achieve, really. And empathy will always make the world better. I think the second one is related to that, and that's about it's expressed. I'm not a religious person, but it's expressed brilliantly in the Serenity Prayer, which is understand the things that you have control of, the things that you don't have control of, and understand the difference. If you can map your world into I am stuck in a traffic jam, but there's nothing I can do about it, therefore I may as well listen to the radio and look out the window, or I am unhappy in my job and I feel like I have more to offer, therefore there are steps I can take to be doing something about that. Understand your ability to have agency, the degree to which you can shape the situation you're in. And if you can let go of the things that you can't shape and take action on the things that you can shape, that is going to make the most enormous difference to your well-being and your happiness, your contentment, really. And then I think the third thing for me would be about understanding that you can influence your thoughts, which influence your feelings, which influences your experiences, which influences the way you live your life, which influences your personality, the way people respond to you. So there is a causal link there between the way you think and your entire existence, your entire experience of life. And understanding that you can change these thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are just neurons firing. Yeah. They don't have any deep meaning. They don't have any validity other than the validity you give them. So if you are thinking a thought, think to yourself, is this thought helpful to me? Not is it real? Is it helpful to me? And if it's not helpful, let it go. And that sometimes is easier said than done, and there are particular kind of ways that you can do that. So pattern interruption, using rubber bands, snapping on your wrist, or there are processes like anchoring, where you can anchor yourself into good feelings. So there's all sorts of different kind of ways of doing it, or positive affirmations or meditation or whatever works for you. But the fundamental principle is understanding that you can change your thoughts, because they are just ephemeral, passing thoughts, and that can have a huge influence on your contentment in your daily life. Wow!
Wow! You just read my mind, because I got a hydrism like that about thoughts. Yeah, it's they're only thoughts. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, exactly. And I say that they're only thoughts. You are not your thoughts.
Exactly. That is it.
You are not your thoughts.
Yeah. And you can choose whether or not to let those thoughts have any weight in
and that's
your life.
Really empowering, Kirsten.
It is.
It is exactly. So empowering. Exactly. It's like, okay, it's only a thought. Do I go with it? Do I enjoy it? Do I augment it? Do I go against it? And then you can play with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point. It's not just about letting go of the negative thoughts. It's also about building on the positive thoughts.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of different ways that you can do that, but knowing that you can is what makes the real.
It's just the thought. I mean, even the negative thoughts, that's sort of an interesting way of looking at things. Okay, so I consider it as a negative thought, but if I delve down into it a bit more, it can turn into something else. It can turn into a reflective thought. It can turn into an empathic thought. It can turn into a sort of a wisdom-like thought. So it sort of opens a lot of doors and opens a lot of, let's say, experiences. Obviously, you still need to stay in reality, because you've got a world out there. You don't want to get too bogged down in the world of thoughts and all that.
But we have so many anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you can just let them go past like clouds in the sky. You don't have to take a kind of fundamental meaning from each one, because it might not have one. It might just.
And also, you don't need to dissociate yourself totally from the thought as well. Don't just sort of go totally blank. Oh yes, I'm going to be in a meditative state and be like Buddha-like sort of thing.
No.
Where I know you're sort of it's great talking to you, but we're coming towards the end of the podcast. If a young lady, professional young lady like yourself, back then, coming out of Oxford University with 2 degrees, what are your 3 tops to them about how they can take care of themselves and not get burnt out and not get fatigued?
I think
looking back,
absolutely, and that this is what really drives me, is this idea that I can help other people avoid my experiences, because they were, it wasn't necessary. I think, in no particular order, as they say, be kind to yourself. And that's very easy to say, but it's not always very easy to do, especially if you're kind of ambitious and driven and you want to make a difference in the world. But it's the classic oxygen mask analogy. When the oxygen mask comes down in the plane, you have to fit yours before you can help anybody else. And the same is true for being successful at work. If you run yourself dry like I did, the reason I got ill every 6 weeks is because that was my body. The only way I would stop was when my body would shut down. And if I had listened to myself and been more kind to myself, I wouldn't have had that kind of boom and bust cycle. So that is the first thing. Be a bit self-aware. I hate the phrase self-care. It's so icky, but it is about that. Understand where your limitations are and understand that's okay, and just look after yourself. Listen to your body, listen to what your body's telling you, rest when you need to. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be about get support before you need it. So think strategically about what you want to be achieving in your career, what paths you might need to take to get there, what skills you might need to have, and set up a supportive network of people, of mentors, of colleagues, professional coaches if you want. Find people who are going to help you on your journey before you have a problem. And the more strategic you are about your career, the less effort you will waste doing things that aren't helpful, and therefore the less energy you'll be expending. And think about ease, think about balance, think about trying to do it as
with people rather than by yourself. With people,
and not just with people, with a plan. Definitely with people, but also make sure you take the time to step back and think about where you're going, because that strategic direction and the support structure to help you achieve it, the two go hand in hand, and they will make your life easier and help you get to where you want to more quickly and with less pain, less effort. And then the last thing, and this is what I didn't do, and really, really hope that people don't follow my example. If you do find yourself having a problem, ask for help. Don't let it carry on, because you don't need to suffer. I mean, I literally never, I told my parents and my boyfriend at the time about my panic attacks and nobody else. And that made it so much worse because it became something that I was ashamed of. I felt like it was a weakness in me. I mean, this was, 2001 it started. So It's a long time ago. I hope that the world of mental health has moved on a lot since then. But if you do find you are struggling, ask for help, because there is help available and you don't need to suffer alone.
Wonderful. That's absolutely amazing. How can people get hold of you, Kirsten?
My website is www.kirstengoodwin.co.uk.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you want to ask me a question before I go?
How do you see the experience of burnout differently in the medical profession to the corporate world?
I think it's the same. But the corporate world, they've been dealing with it a lot sooner than the medical world. So they have, organizational structures. They talk about these things. Whereas in the medical world, it's still a bit, untraditional. We're probably about another 40 years behind you guys.
Yeah, the culture makes a big difference to how these things are responded to.
Yeah, but it's getting better in the sense that people are talking about it, but that'll mean there'll be more people coming out with burnout.
Well, hopefully with the work that you're doing and the work that people around us both are doing, we can make a difference.
Yeah,
it could be that way.
And I think this is where sort of doing these podcasts, where there can be collaborations, there can be sort of interdisciplinary meetings and discussing these issues, and we can sort of help each other out in our respective professions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kirsten.
That's brilliant. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to this installment of the Surgical Spirit podcast. For all the latest in the world of surgical spirit, don't forget to follow on Twitter at The Third Eye Doc, and catch me on Facebook at the page The Third Eye Doctor. You can visit the website at www.thethirdeyedoctor.co.uk for more information on the work that I do. And please send us feedback and questions and suggestions for the podcast. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I've been Dr. Haider Al-Hakim, and I'll see you next time.